I'm Dr. Amy Lindsay, and I am a naturopathic and integrative doctor serving people of all genders in midlife. I'm currently living in Seattle, Washington, and I hold my medical license in both California and Washington, so I'm actually in California quite a bit. But I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah in the 70s and 80s. Gen X, right here. Salt Lake City has a very large Mormon population, and I grew up in a family of Mormons, and there are 14 children in my family. So I am one of 14 kids, number 11. So one of 4 girls, and there are 10 boys. So I have 10 brothers and 3 sisters. It was a lot. It was very overwhelming. I think that my parents were maintaining a Mormon status quo, but I think they were in over their heads. I remember it feeling I didn't get a lot of attention. Resources would be very thin at times. It would ebb and flow. My dad he owned his own business, so sometimes things were great, sometimes things were not so great. And you would feel that in a family of 14 kids. And you know, I have a lot of brothers, and so I often found myself doing a lot of sports and a lot of activities with my brothers. I think I actually connected to my brothers more than my sisters at that time. But yeah, I think it was a lot. It was overwhelming. You know, it took adulthood to work through a lot of that, I think. I actually stopped going to church when I was about 13 or 14 years old, and throughout my life, I just kind of ignored it, but I was definitely considered an outsider or black sheep of the family, that kind of thing. But to be honest, all of my sisters left the church, and many of my brothers did as well. And then sometime in my 30s, it became really important for me to officially leave the church. So I excommunicated myself from the Mormon church in my 30s. At some point, the Mormon church came out and basically said that people who are transgendered were of the devil. And for me, that was the last straw. I mean, there were a lot of straws, but for me, that was the last one. And so the LGBTQIA community held a lot of rallies on Temple Square in Salt Lake City, all over the world, really. And so I kind of piggybacked on that train, and we did a mass resignation. And I had to hire a lawyer, actually, to make sure all the paperwork went through. And to be honest, the moment that letter of recognition came back that I had officially left the church, I mean, I just remember sobbing on my kitchen floor. I was so relieved. I do think the Mormon church does have a lot of redeeming qualities, as any organized religion does. I think that at the heart of a lot of what any organized religion is trying to do is they are trying to have some connection to a source they believe in, some sort of God or divinity that they believe in, and organize themselves in community together. And you know, there's a lot of community feeling to the Mormon church, and they take care of each other. And you know, even today, given everything I just said, if anything ever happened to me, they would absolutely come and take care of me. So I think there's a huge community there. And I think that they are trying to ask those bigger questions about life, which I think is really important. My story with health is kind of interesting. I wasn't always a doctor. I grew up, as I said, in a family of 14 kids, and I played a lot of music. I played piano. I used to put on these shows in my basement. I would create musicals or dance performances or piano performances or rock performances, and I would go around the neighborhood and sell tickets to people. And so I was doing concerts in my basement when I was a kid, and often it would be the neighbors and my whole family, and they would be my audience. And that's what I did spend a lot of my time doing. At the same time, my dad was very interested in his health right as he turned 50. So I have this very crystal clear memory of my dad turning 50 and he drained our swimming pool. We had this swimming pool in our backyard, and he filled it with dirt, and he made a garden. And his whole thing was, okay, we're gonna grow food, we're gonna eat well, and he hung a boxing bag in the garage, and he started working out and boxing. And I have very clear, like my dad completely shifted on the way he approached health, and he was a huge inspiration for me. And so, fast forward, I ended up working in the music industry for a long time. And it wasn't until my own health started to suffer, and I was going to the doctor and not getting a clear diagnosis, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this story. Nobody's really listening to you. They're telling you you're fine, go home. And when I finally did get a diagnosis, I'm okay, and it's definitely something to manage, but the person who figured it out was an integrative practitioner. And so I was so inspired by my work with her, and so inspired by how much better I got and how much more healthy I became with working with her. I had this night working in a club, doing a concert that I was doing now as a job. And it was 3 a.m, and I was packing up a drum kit, and everybody was off drinking and had abandoned the show, and I was still there working. And I just thought, what am I doing? What am I doing? I can't do this anymore, especially if I'm going to take care of myself. And that's when I made the decision to go back to school and go to naturopathic medical school. An integrative practitioner, so we're trained in primary care like you would go to any other medical doctor who's trained in primary care. We have all those tools, all that accreditation, prescribing rights, diagnosis, treatment, the whole thing, can refer you to specialists. But what an integrative practitioner does is we have a whole other set of tools. So we learn botanical medicines and plant medicines. We learn physical medicine, which would be not quite like physical therapy, but a little bit like that. We also learn we learn psychology and counseling is in my scope of practice. And we also take on this idea of looking at the way we look at health and healing is more holistic. So we're great at looking at everything sort of broad, and then able to send people, who need more support in a specialized manner. It's interesting, right as I got my medical degree, because it was later in life, I was working with cancer patients and with oncologists. So I was working in a hospital setting with a breast cancer surgeon for a while. I was working in an oncology center downtown Seattle, and we were bringing sort of this adjunctive care to their conventional oncology treatments. And I was doing that for a while, but then 2020 happened. And anyone who wasn't absolutely necessary was furloughed or laid off, or, we all kind of were sent home. And I was suddenly homeschooling my children, which I didn't expect. And my story's not unique. I think many people had that pandemic pivot, as we call it. And I decided to start an online medical practice, and I had no idea what I was doing. I honestly had no idea about telehealth. I hadn't used telehealth before, and I had a lot of learning to do. So I pivoted to telehealth. I started my own practice, and I figured out very quickly that seeing cancer patients online was not appropriate. That would not be an appropriate thing for me to do. And so I decided to back up a little bit, and I thought, well, how can I work with people, all these breast cancer patients I had seen, how can I work with people before they get to that point? So I got interested in hormone therapies, and eventually that turned into hormone therapies for all genders, because quite honestly, we don't talk about menopause enough, but we also don't talk about andropause enough, which is what happens to male sex at birth folks. So I got very interested in that, and so I started seeing all these midlife patients online, and my practice grew all over Washington and California because it's online. People don't have to come to a place to see me. We can do it online. And something really interesting started to happen was that I started to notice that people got better when they got more in touch with themselves. So back to that conversation about, coming into a sense of purpose, or a sense of what you say, your assignment, or coming into a sense of what are we doing in our life? What's the point? And I think in midlife, that question gets louder. And people call it a midlife crisis. I call it a midlife opportunity. I think it's a gift. And I noticed that people's health was connected to their mental health, and their mental health and physical health was connected to what they were doing in the world. And so for me, and I would find this with myself, it was very meta, right? I went through a divorce, I went through, a job change. The more I started paying attention to what I need to be doing with my life and the direction I need to be going in, my health improved. And then I started to see this symbiotic relationship and started to work with my patients on that. So a lot of what we do is the mental health piece, is the physical health piece, but a lot of what I ask my patients is, why? Why would you want health? And what for? What do you want to do in your life? And if they can answer that question, then we align their health to their life purpose. I've seen so many breakthroughs in supporting people in this way. When you're really connecting those dots, people's personal lives get better, their relationships get better, they leave abusive partners, they change jobs, they become entrepreneurs, they're more successful, and they start aligning their health, and they feel a lot better being who they are in the world, and they have a lot more strength to be who they need to be in the world. They have a lot that physical strength, that mental strength, and they can just live their life how they need to live it. Recently, I just got back from summiting Kilimanjaro, Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. And this has been a lifelong dream. And it started all the way back into Sunday school when I was 10 years old in Mormon church. And up until that point, what was modeled for me, so the Mormon church is, it's a lot of white old men, right? I mean, that's kind of who runs the show there. And what was modeled for me, you would see the men in the church doing all kinds of stuff. And you would see the women in the church marrying and having lots of kids at the time. I mean, Mormon women do a lot more, especially these days, but back then, that's what was modeled for me. And 10 years old, in walks, I call her a lioness. She's wearing I remember what she was wearing, a denim dress, white nylon stockings. She had this brunette bob to here. She came walking in, and she was a guest speaker in my Sunday school class. And she was talking about self-esteem and believing in yourself. And she told the story of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And this woman was 27 years old and single. And I thought, wow, wait a second, what? You're not married, you don't have kids, you went and hiked this mountain in Africa. And that was the first time I felt that crack in the, as a child, like, oh, I could do something myself. I don't have to follow status quo. And I was only 10 years old, but I started to get ideas about things. Fast forward all the way till now, 14 months ago now, I had my second hip replacement and was very depressed, quite honestly. And my mobility wasn't great, and I was struggling with my PT, and I was having a lot of that shame, I can't heal myself, and I'm a doctor, woe is me. And I was kind of being victim-y about the whole thing. And I said to myself, I'm not even gonna be able to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I went, wait a second. And I kind of gave myself a pep talk. Of course you can. Of course you can. So I signed up, and I still hadn't even made it through PT with my hip replacement. So I signed up to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And boy, you better believe I was compliant AF with my PT at that point. PT is physical therapy. I went every time, I did it every day. I built my strength back. I went from walking with a walker to walking with a cane to walking in my neighborhood unassisted to hiking mountains to doing strength training and building muscle and building my endurance. And I summited Kilimanjaro on January 14th. Summiting Mount Kilimanjaro, I've been asked what surprised me the most about the whole experience. And what surprised me the most, honestly, was how strong I was and how little I suffered. And I think the reason why, there's a little bit of luck in there. I didn't suffer from altitude sickness, and there's a little bit of luck in there. But I think that it was something that called to me. It was mine. It went all the way back to childhood, and it was a childhood dream. So it belonged to me in that way. It belonged to my spirit, if you will. And then doing what needed to be done physically to get there. Yeah. So it was 6 days on the mountain. We were in a group. I was the only female-bodied person in our group, and I was at the front of the pack, doing my best to try to learn some Swahili and talk to the guides. And, they taught us songs, and it was a very beautiful experience with a wonderful group of people. And I had managed to talk my spouse into it, which wasn't a dream of his, but it became one. And it became his own experience as well. And the biggest takeaway I got was, boy, we really heal together. We don't heal alone. And everyone on that climb had their own story of how they got there. And even the guides, they all had their own stories, how they became guides and how they learned multiple languages so that they could be guides for tourism, and how they had learned to climb Mount Kilimanjaro and had, they do it 3 times a month. I'm all like, hey, I did it once in my life, and they do it 3 times a month. And those people are amazing. But I learned that we healed together. And, my patients, I gave them the GPS so they could follow me on my climb. And so many of my patients, when I came back and I would have my visits with them, they all said they had been doing everything I'd been telling them to do. They had been doing their workouts. They had been doing their health plan. And I realized something, that we don't just need to tell people, we need to show people. And that when we show people who we're being and we model that for them, that we can inspire other people. I've always climbed mountains. Since I was little, my dad would take us hiking, and I've always loved it. I feel so good when I'm outside and I'm in nature like that. And I am already starting to eye different mountains that I want to climb. And I was eyeing Mont Blanc in France in the Alps, and it's a little technical, so it intimidates me a little bit, but I think, why not? But one thing I am thinking more about doing is I do hold a lot of retreats, but I haven't held many retreats where we do something that physical. And I think that I want to do more retreats that require like some sort of motivation for people to actually step into an area of physical health that might be a goal for them if they're able. So I do have an Instagram account, Craft and Clinic. I'm not very active on there. I gotta say, my social media tolerance has gone quite a bit down recently. But I also have a website, craftandclinic.com, and there you can get on a wait list. I do have a wait list for Dr. Amy's Big Adventures is what I'm calling them. And I am looking into, the Camino in Spain. I'm looking into hiking rim to rim of the Grand Canyon. I'm kind of looking for different levels of things, right? The rim to rim of the Grand Canyon is hard. It's a hard one. But the Camino in Spain, it's definitely a lot of walking for a lot of days, but it's a little more accessible to more people. So I'm trying to play with these, retreats where we have some big adventure. We have a bucket list that we're doing, something maybe people have always wanted to do, but that requires, some sort of mental and physical commitment. I went to a retreat in Puerto Rico, And it was Rachel Rogers' first ROI. And my friend, Dr. Erica, who lives in LA, went with me, and we went together to this retreat. And we spent the first day hiking El Yunque rainforest. So again, we're both adventurers. The first day of the conference, my friend, Dr. Erica, was holding Arlan's book, It's About Damn Time. And Arlan was speaking at the conference, and Dr. Erica, like, all she wanted to do was to see Arlan. And I didn't know Arlan. That was the first time I had heard of Arlan. And we were standing in line to go to Arlan, and I ended up going to another room to see my friend Robert speak, and she was in line with to see Arlan when she got a phone call that her mother had died. And I was pulled out of the room. She was in another room, and when I went in there, it was just a community of people holding her while she grieved her mother's death. And so she never got to go see Arlan. She was holding on to her book, and I'll never forget this. We just threw everything in our suitcases, and I got on a plane with her, and we went back to LA. And during that time, Arlan actually reached out to my friend, just personally, and sent her a signed copy of the book. And I just thought, who is this? Like, so down to earth. Arlan is so down to earth, and just reached out like that. Like, there's this person who came to see me, and her mother died, and was just so genuine and so caring that I thought, well, my friend Dr. Erica is really about this book and is really into Arlan Hamilton, so I've got to check this out. So I did. And when I was, after my second hip replacement, I was feeling kind of depressed and down. And at that point, I was on Arlan's list. And Arlan sent a list talking about her first Million Live event in LA. And I just decided to dust myself off, grab my cane, and get on a flight to LA and come to Arlan's event. And so I signed up for a Purple Pass, and I, had a great time. And at some point, I ended up in Arlan's suite. And I still don't know how I got there. Somehow I got access to, like, sitting in Arlan's suite with, 10 or 12 people. And most of those people were in Inner Circle. And I had been talking to a few people about that, and I just thought, this is a sign, I gotta do this. And so I joined Inner Circle April of 2024. Inner Circle is this community of entrepreneurs who all support one another. And that's what I love most about it, is that everyone wants everyone to win. There's not a competitive feeling in the group. You don't get this comparisonitis that you get in some other groups. It really, truly is a bunch of people wanting everyone else to win and celebrating each other's successes and offering support in any way they can. And I really feel that from myself. I hope that I'm giving that to people, and I feel that Arlan cultivates that culture in her Inner Circle. My assignment is to be the medicine, is to be my true authentic self, to pursue my art and my music and my medicine and healing, and to pursue it and show other people that their assignment also is to be their true authentic self. And that the more people can have that courage to be themselves and to tell the truth, the more diverse and beautiful the world is, and the more healthy I think people are individually, but I think more healthy we are as a society. And that's not, status quo definition of health. I think that's that mental, spiritual, physical health. I would say to anyone who has a diagnosis or is struggling with their health or their mobility, I would just say, first of all, hang in there. And secondly, you're not alone. That the more you share yourself and the more you share your story, the more it's like you look up, you look up and you see that there's so many other people in the world who are going through what you're going through. And the more you share your story, the more resources and the more people come your way, and the more help that you can receive more support. And never give up. Always believe in yourself and trust yourself. I want people to trust themselves. I think people are often looking out here for everything, and I think if you just trust yourself more, you can find the answer.